CR 864 Extract on Thoughts, Feelings, and Emotions.
CR 864 Extract, pages 11 to 14. Conversation between Quetzal of the Pleiaren Federation and Billy Edouard Albert Meyer. Billy Edouard Albert Meyer 864th Contact Sunday, September 17, 2023, 8:45 a.m.
As usual, there is nothing to hide from you. How do you actually do this, that you can often predict what is behind what will be said? I have often noticed that you know what is being thought without me saying so. How are you able to do that?
You really want to know?
Yes, is it then reading thoughts?
No, I don't do that in principle, because one says thoughts are free and personal. It nevertheless does not justify, in my view, that unconsciously and without permission of the fellow human beings, one penetrates into their world of thoughts, and not even if there is an acquired capability to do so. Thoughts, whether good or bad, are of personal possession, and which shall not be violated or stolen, any more than material possessions. Now if I know, however, what wants to be spoken, then this is based only on a close observation of the countenance of the person speaking, however, nothing more.
But this needs a capability, which I, however, personally do not possess.
That must simply be learned, and indeed very intensively, namely for years. There really is no other way. To explain it is the following, which I had written already in the 1940s, and also was made clear in writing by Svath to somebody in the USA, yet we never received a response to it. However, here in the computer, I have begun to call up and write down the whole thing, so I can read it to you. But first I have to look for it. Yes. Here, there, I have already retrieved and written the following concerning thoughts, feelings, and emotions.
Feelings and the emotions resulting from them are given universally, as a product of preceding thoughts in every life form, which in some wise or other has any thinking. And it makes no difference at all how this thinking takes place. Emotions also form from the feelings, which appear particularly in human beings, animals and other creatures, since they are capable of thinking, because the thinking alone makes it possible that feelings also arise from them. If human beings are left out of the explanation, who through their consciousness are capable of nourishing and cherishing logical, rational and intellectually based thoughts, which correspondingly form emotions, then the closest reasoner beings, who are capable of thoughts, are the animals. These are exclusively mammalian life forms, which however cannot cultivate conscious thoughts in such a wise as the human being, but whose world of thoughts is more directed to instincts, as this is also the case with other creatures. Other creatures are thereby all those living creatures like for example chickens, ducks, turtles, lizards, birds, snakes, fish and so forth, who are still capable of instinctive thinking and can produce feelings from it. Reasoner beings are creatures, mainly the human being, but also animals and other creatures, develop emotions from feelings, which, in addition to the modes of behavior, also control the body to determine reactions, as well as the interaction with its own kind and all other life forms of every species and kind, but also with thousandfold things and matters, as well as situations of life and existence, the entirety of nature, the planet and all ecosystems. If the human being is analyzed with regard to his or her thinking and the feelings arising from it, then emotions come from them, and from these in turn, decisions arise that determine the behavior, and thus also the life of the human being. Depending on the good or bad kind of the arising feelings and the emotions resulting from them, the actions, and through that, in turn, the life is formed that is worth living or harmful to living. In any case, preceding everything are always the thoughts, which form the central constituent part for logic, intellect and rationality, and according to which feelings, and from them emotions and decisions, as well as the behavior and action arise. But the thoughts and the thereout resulting feelings, as well as the emotions resulting again from them, are still very much more. Namely mighty evaluation systems, which let the human being rightly assess many situations automatically if his or her thoughts correspond to the rightness. Consequently, he or she can react quickly and also in the right wise. Feeling, that is, what human beings consciously experience as fear, freedom, joy, sorrow, failure and anger, is basically just the well-known tip of the iceberg of everything that arises from it. Exactly as in the case of a gigantic floating iceberg, where 9/10 of its volume is hidden in the water beneath it. It is also the case with thoughts, feelings as well as with emotional processes arising from them. That very much remains ununderstandable and imperceptible, hidden and not yet known for the human being, however, only because as a rule, hidden and absolutely imperceptible, belief-based factors play into the whole thing for him or her. The emotions that arise not only affect the individual or subjective experience, but they also encompass the physical reactions as a whole, which, through distinct triggers, prepare the human being for a behavior that moves him or her to action and activity. For example, this automatically causes the human being's blood pressure and heart rate to rise when he or she sees something that demands fear, anxiety, alarm from him or her, which, however, improves the blood supply and thus also benefits the muscles, because an optimal energy supply to the muscles takes place via the release of hormones. The concentration that is directed towards the potential threat automatically prevents all thoughts from turning to other things and instantly makes the threat or open danger seem important. This in turn creates a very ideal precondition for two courses of action to immediately appear, namely to defend oneself in a flash against the danger, or to take flight. Every feeling creates a wide-ranging emotion, which is also very extensive and focuses on making the life of the human being worth living, because an emotion is truthfully a central component of the human innermost being. An emotion, however, is still very much more, because, as said, it is a mighty evaluation system that automatically lets the human being correctly assess many situations, when it is made use of in the right wise, and thus also respond quickly and rightly. Thoughts create a complex state of feelings, as well as a conscious subjective experience, which also triggers physical processes and behavioral impulses, which then play an important role. The fact that a wide variety of impulsations appear, such as love, peaceableness, anxiety, anger or dejection and so forth, is typical for emotions. Thereby it is completely normal that physical, as well as mental processes couple, and thus influence the human being as a whole, and in extreme cases can even cast a complete spell over him or her. The fact that arising emotions emerge from the feelings is also normal. But whether these emotions are then positively controlled or otherwise negatively and uncontrollably implemented, that is then only the human being acting according to his or her will. So the feelings are what the human being, usually without thinking much, experiences in some way consciously unconsciously as fear, joy, love, jealousy, hatred, anger, freedom or sorrow, etc. The feelings that give rise to and form emotions inevitably make their way to the outside in the form of visible facial expressions. The tone of voice and behavioral tendencies, as well as gestures. Consequently, in this wise, the feelings and emotional state resulting from them, which is also referred to as Gemut state. Because obviously the feelings are also wrongly defined as Gemut, become recognizable. Because the emotional emergence of the human being lives everything outwardly, and is perceived and witnessed by the fellow human beings. We are talking here, for example, about expressive language and a behavioral component of expanding forms. And this aspect in particular is already put inside the term X itself, and reveals, analogously, that it concerns a movement to the outside. The fact that the emotion created by feelings moves from the inside to the outside and then manifests itself. The human being quite often becomes conscious of this only in hindsight, if this is the case at all. How exactly and closely the individual components of the emotional processes are connected, that is given by the feelings, because the thoughts of course must first proceed, which are fundamentally the factors that ultimately cause everything. Consequently, without thoughts there are no feelings, just as without feelings there are no emotions, and from emotions, in turn, no impulsations, deeds and modes of behavior can arise. Specific areas of the brain are involved in everything, which generate and control neurobiological processes, although emotions are so complex and multifaceted that they can hardly be generated in a controlled manner. Furthermore, not every human being reacts in the same way to certain situations, which in itself creates a wide variety of problems in order to be able to pigeonhole emotions into a specific schema. It is difficult for the human being alone, as a person affected by emotions, to be able to perceive them as a whole, namely because he or she is already not able to define his or her feelings, but also because he or she cannot logically follow the origin of them, namely his or her thoughts that precede everything. Therefore the human being often perceives the whole procedure only very diffusely. This is especially the case when the feelings go uncontrollably crazy and no clear and striking cognitions are possible anymore, because they are no longer perceived in the right wise and are just diffuse. Feelings and emotions arising from them do indeed bring variety into life, and every human being actually knows what thoughts and emotions arising from them are, but as a rule these emotions cannot be defined as what they actually are in their values and in their effects. It is also not understood that the emotions do not arise and manifest themselves before the feelings, but rather that it is exactly the other way around, namely that certain feelings are first created from certain thoughts, and only from these feelings do the emotions then develop. Feelings and the resultant emotions are not always good and beautiful, positive and peaceful, but also bad, negative and even deadly. But if the human being tries to lead the life without thoughts, feelings and emotions in a strictly objective and rational wise, then this will never succeed, because without thoughts, without feelings and emotions, he or she could not live and would be as good as a living goner. The human being would be a pseudo-Visin without feeling for others, and his or her existence would only be a pseudo-human one, and as empty as it is completely meaningless. Also, practically everything that makes him or her unique as a person would be lost, such as regarding the fact that his or her personal life history would also be null and void. The feelings-based founded emotionality of one's own person is a decisive and special part of the human personality, because the strong feelings and the thereout resulting emotions have not only formed the actions and activities of the respective human being in the past, but they also have an effect as special episodes at the present time and in the future, and continuously form, influence, characterize, and developmentally change the inner identity of the human being. This is, so to speak, a personal experience, which shows that the human being really changes in the course of his or her life, which may be in the good as well as in the bad, depending on how the human being directs himself or herself. Depending on this and on the arising happenings, they are only weakly or particularly deeply stored in the memory. Emotions often enjoy a very bad reputation, especially then and by human beings who have a negative life conduct and consequently ungood and otherwise bad thoughts. If, on the contrary, they would nourish reasonable and good thoughts, cherish them and bring about similar considerations, and would not make decisions irrationally and unpredictably, then they would be good and rational human beings. It is undeniable that, for example, quarreling in many cases does not lead to any problem solving, just as what has been learned is also not brought to bear. On the other hand, however, emotions, if they can unfold in a right wise, bring in the course of time a valuable evolution, which develops high-value wise. This is necessary for the human being, so that he or she can altogether make right decisions and react to his or her environment in a suitable wise. Looked at and considered rightly and thus rationally. Thoughts, feelings and emotions resulting from them are never a luxury, but they are a complex system of assistive means and help in the life of the human being and his or her existence. The evolution of the human being, through his or her thoughts, feelings and the thereout resulting emotions, has brought forth values which are essential for survival, such as a mentally lightning fast and generally comprehensive evaluation system. Consequently, everything can be comprehended and evaluated which falls within the scope of the comprehension ability of the human being, as of all living creatures in general. This system is genetically given, and with its further development therefore, is also inheritable in this wise. Just as it also guarantees that it brings forth feelings arising from the thoughts, and these feelings in turn bring forth the emotions, which then simply steer the actions and behavior of the human being, and indeed pleasantly or unpleasantly, depending on their psyche. If something seems disgusting, ugly or simply entirely repulsive, then the emotions that are likewise formed repulsively from feelings that have already been characterized by repulsion, direct themselves accordingly. However, if motivated by the feelings of freedom, happiness, joy, love and peace, then the emotions form correspondingly, and show the human being that it is worthwhile to use his or her energy, powers and time to nourish and cherish good and positive thoughts, in order to thereby also create good and positive feelings, from which in turn good and positive emotions are formed. However, human beings who already have bad and negative thoughts and create corresponding feelings and emotions of the same kind from them, should not be surprised if their life and existence is going badly or even sinking into depression. If bad and belief-oriented thoughts also create corresponding feelings, then the cerebral cortex, that is to say important parts of the cortex, is also harmed, namely because the processing of emotions is done poorly. From bad, dependent and especially from belief-based thoughts arise exactly the same feelings, which in turn give rise to similar emotions. However, these emotions are a mighty system for the evaluation of situations and for the initiation of deeds and modes of behavior. And they are always very fast in their activity, consequently the emotional reaction often takes place before the human being even becomes conscious of the matter and situation. This is to say nothing of even thinking about it. Namely, the emotional circuits in the limbic system are able to prepare an initial assessment and evaluation of what is to come. And indeed even before the comparatively slow-working higher cortex areas in the feelings arise, which spread into the emotions forming therefrom and evolve into them. The feelings are very important and promote therefrom the emotions to the human being, although the processes turn out to be somewhat different from what science claims to be right. And they also show what moves and guides the human being in his or her life. Unfortunately, it often happens that it is particularly difficult and arduous when the world of thoughts is full of negativity, and consequently negative goods of thoughts create bad and even evil feelings, such as anxiety and hatred, as well as enmity, anger, forlornness, resentment or shame and so on, and thus factors that are not or only very difficult to control, but often non-controllable. This is especially true when the human being is treated unfairly or feels like that, as well as when he or she is embarrassed by something, such as a reprimand and the like, or a stupid answer, allegation, assertion, and so on. Very often, the human being does not know how he or she shall react to such stupid statements, or stupid allegations, etc. Consequently, he or she becomes embarrassed, ashamed or reacts angrily. The thoughts, the thereout resulting feelings, as well as the emotions that inevitably arise from them are very important instruments for communication. Emotions in particular have a central function for social interaction. A large part of human communication takes place, albeit often only unconsciously, by the transmission of emotions with regard to the expression component, that is, through facial expressions of the countenance and gestures, or body language and pitch of the voice. In this way the human being can adjust to his or her counterpart before he or she is able to put his or her concerns into words. On the other hand, even in large gatherings of human beings, it is perceived at lightning speed where significant things are going on and whether it is worthwhile to participate or to stay away because of the possibility of danger. However, just how important verbal communication is for this social communicative component to function at all can be seen. For example, in the case of those human beings who suffer from autism, because these are beings who are afflicted with a developmental disorder that acts like a kind of illiteracy, and are dependent on help with regard to recognizing the non-verbal communications of emotions and modes of behavior. This is because these human beings can only understand other human beings by their emotional expression, so they tend to live a life strongly withdrawn from their surroundings. This is, however, only one of many emotional disorders that occur in human beings and fundamentally affect their private, social and professional lives. The human capability of thinking and the overestimation of the self, as well as the emphasis of the self, influence the whole of the actions and behavior, and in general all cognitive processes of the majority of the Earth's population. This also affects all bodily functions, mainly the heart rate, blood pressure and sweating, which are controlled by the autonomic nervous system and by hormones. Ultimately, facial expressions, gestures, as well as the tone of the voice, but also the actions and modes of behavior of the human being, break through as a result of the thoughts, their feelings and the thereout resulting emotions, in which the emotions in particular inevitably find a way to the outside through the speech, actions and behavior and make themselves audibly noticeable through the voice and visibly by facial expressions, the countenance, and manifesting through the actions and behavior.